The cries of a newborn echoed softly in the narrow backstreets of Accra as Efua clutched her baby close to her chest. The night was dark, the air heavy with silence, broken only by her quiet sobs. She was just a young woman, trembling, overwhelmed by fear and shame. Society would never forgive her mistake, and her family had already turned their backs. Poverty pressed on her like a chain, and loneliness suffocated her every breath. Yet in her arms lay a child so innocent, so pure, a child who had done nothing to deserve this fate. Her footsteps led her to a small church, its wooden cross glimmering faintly under the moonlight. She stood there for a long moment, her heart breaking with every beat. The baby stirred, tiny fists waving, as if begging her not to let go. Efua's tears fell on the child's cheeks, mingling with his own soft whimpers. She held him tighter, torn between her love and her helplessness. "Forgive me, my child," she whispered, her voice cracking under the weight of pain. She slipped a small bracelet around his little wrist, her only way of leaving a piece of herself with him. With shaking hands, she placed the baby gently on the cold steps of the church. The door was only a few feet away, yet it felt like miles. She knocked lightly, her breath catching as she pulled back into the shadows. The baby's cry pierced the night, a sound that sliced through her heart like a knife. Efua covered her mouth to keep from screaming. She wanted to rush back, to grab him, to run far away where no one could judge them. But fear anchored her feet to the ground. Poverty, shame, and hopelessness whispered louder than her motherly instinct. Inside, a faint light flickered. Soon, footsteps approached. Efua's heart pounded as she saw the church door slowly creak open. A figure appeared, lantern in hand. The pastor's weary eyes widened as he noticed the bundle on the ground. He bent down, lifting the baby into his arms. The child wailed, but the man's gentle voice soothed him. From the shadows, Efua watched, her body shaking uncontrollably. Relief and heartbreak collided within her. She knew her son was no longer hers, yet she prayed silently that he would find the love and future she could never give. With one last look, she turned away, disappearing into the darkness of the night, carrying nothing but her guilt and the memory of her child's cry that would haunt her forever. The wooden door of the church creaked open wider as Pastor Kwabena stepped onto the steps, his lantern casting a soft glow over the bundle left in the night. His heart skipped when he saw the tiny face, wet with tears, wrapped in a worn piece of cloth. He lifted the baby carefully, his hands trembling, as if he was holding a miracle he had long prayed for. Inside, his wife Amma stirred awake, rushing toward him the moment she heard the faint cries. Amma's eyes widened, filling with tears the instant she saw the child. For years she had lived with the quiet sorrow of not being able to bear children. Night after night, she had prayed for a blessing, for even the smallest chance to hold a child in her arms. And now, as if heaven itself had answered, here was this boy, abandoned but alive. She reached for him with trembling hands, pressing him against her chest as though she would never let him go. "Kwabena," she whispered, her voice breaking, "God has sent him to us." The couple decided to raise him as their own. They named him Kojo, meaning born on Monday, for it was on that day he came into their lives. From that moment, their world changed. The little house beside the church, once filled with silence, now echoed with laughter, small cries, and the warmth of family they had always longed for. As the years passed, Kojo grew into a bright and curious boy. He ran through the dusty streets with other children, climbed trees near the churchyard, and filled Amma's days with joy she had thought she would never know. Pastor Kwabena guided him with patience, teaching him values of kindness, honesty, and faith. To the world, Kojo was their son, and to him, they were his parents. Yet, in the quiet moments, Kojo often wondered. He would look at his reflection in the water, touching the small bracelet on his wrist, and feel a question rising inside him. Other children sometimes teased, whispering rumors that he wasn't truly Amma and Kwabena's blood. Though his parents never spoke of it, he sensed a gap in his story that no one explained. Still, he was loved deeply, raised with care and devotion. In that love, Kojo found strength. But in his heart, the mystery of where he came from remained, like a shadow that followed him wherever he went, waiting for the day destiny would reveal the truth. Years slipped by, and Efua's life took a path no one expected. The frightened young girl who once cried in the shadows of a church grew into a strong and determined woman. She worked tirelessly, building a small trading business that, over the years, blossomed into a successful company in Accra. To the world, she was admired, respected, and even envied. Her clothes were fine, her home spacious, her name known in places where it once meant nothing. But behind the success, Efua carried a wound that no wealth or recognition could ever heal. Every night, when silence filled her grand house, the same memory returned to her like a ghost. The sound of her baby's cry on that cold night. The way her hands trembled as she left him behind. The bracelet she had slipped on his wrist. These images never faded, no matter how hard she tried to bury them under work and ambition. She had abandoned her child, and the weight of that choice lived with her every single day. Sometimes, Efua would sit alone by her window, staring at the city lights, clutching the tiny bracelet she had kept all these years. It was the only thing she had left of him, the only proof that he had once been hers. She would press it against her lips, whispering apologies to a child who could no longer hear her. "Forgive me," she would murmur, tears burning her eyes. But the night always answered with silence. Dreams tormented her. In them, she often saw a boy running, calling out for a mother he couldn't find. Other times she saw herself reaching for him, but no matter how close she came, he always disappeared into the distance. Efua would wake up sweating, her heart aching as though she had just lost him all over again. She tried to distract herself by working harder, filling her days with meetings and responsibilities, but even in the middle of success, her mind betrayed her. At celebrations, when she saw children laughing with their mothers, her smile would falter. When she passed a church and heard a baby cry, her chest tightened until she could hardly breathe. Efua had everything: wealth, respect, comfort, but she lacked the one thing her soul longed for, her son. She lived with the haunting thought that somewhere in the world, he was growing up without her, perhaps never knowing she existed. And though years passed, her heart never let her forget the choice she made that night. Kojo was no longer the small boy who once played freely in the dusty streets. He was now a teenager, tall and thoughtful, with questions in his eyes that no one seemed willing to answer. Though Pastor Kwabena and Alma loved him deeply and never treated him as anything less than their own son, Kojo often felt a shadow around him, something that set him apart from everyone else. At school, the whispers began quietly. Children, cruel in their innocence, sometimes pointed at him and said, "He's not really their son." The words pierced him like sharp blades, leaving wounds that no comfort could fully heal. At home, he tried to hide his confusion, but in the quiet of the night, he lay awake, staring at the bracelet on his wrist, wondering why it felt like the only link to a story he didn't know. He would ask Alma questions gently. "Mama, why don't I look like you?" Alma would smile sadly, brushing his hair, and tell him love made them family. Pastor Kwabena would remind him that God chose them for each other. Their answers were filled with love, but not with truth, and the more they avoided it, the more restless Kojo became. Sometimes, when he walked alone, he imagined who his real parents might be. Were they still alive? Did they ever think of him? Or had they abandoned him without a second thought? These questions chased him endlessly, filling his heart with both anger and longing. The silence around his past felt heavier with each passing day, and it pushed him to search for answers even when he didn't know where to begin. He began spending more time in the library, digging through records, staring at old newspapers, hoping to find a clue that might explain who he truly was. Every lead ended in disappointment, but his determination only grew. Deep down, he believed that one day he would uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Still, the struggle weighed on him. He loved Alma and Pastor Kwabena, but he couldn't silence the ache of not knowing. He felt torn between gratitude for the life they gave him and the emptiness of the unanswered questions. His heart carried a storm, one that only the truth could calm. And as he grew older, the need to discover his real beginnings became stronger than ever, setting him on a path destiny had already prepared. Kojo's hunger for knowledge grew as strong as his search for identity. He spent countless nights studying under the dim light of a lantern, determined to prove himself. His hard work paid off when news arrived that he had won a scholarship to study in Kumasi. Alma wept with pride, Pastor Kwabena laid his hands on him in prayer, and the whole church celebrated his achievement. For Kojo, it was more than education, it was a chance to step into a bigger world and perhaps find the answers he had long been seeking. With a small suitcase and the bracelet still tied around his wrist, Kojo left Accra. The road to Kumasi stretched long, but excitement burned inside him. He looked out the window of the bus, watching villages and fields pass by, unaware that destiny was quietly guiding his path. In that very city lived Efua, the woman who had given him life and the same woman who had let him go. Neither knew how close they were to meeting, but fate had already begun its silent work. Kumasi was alive with energy, its streets buzzing with trade, its people moving with purpose. Kojo felt both lost and alive in the new city. He walked through the gates of his university with pride, unaware that only a few streets away stood Efua's office building, a place where she controlled a growing empire. She was a woman admired for her success, respected for her strength, yet still haunted at night by the son she abandoned. Their lives began to circle nearer. Kojo would often pass by the business district on his way to classes, unaware that the woman who sometimes stepped out of the black car, surrounded by assistants, was his own mother. Efua, too, had moments where she noticed young faces in the crowd, lingering on one or two with strange feelings, never knowing that the boy she longed for was within reach. Opportunities began to open for Kojo. To support himself, he searched for part-time work, knocking on doors, determined to ease the burden on Pastor Kwabena and Alma. One of those doors, by pure chance, was connected to Efua's company. Neither of them knew it, but destiny was pulling the invisible strings, weaving their paths closer with every passing day. Their hearts, separated by years of silence and regret, were moving steadily toward the moment where truth could no longer remain hidden. Kojo's search for work finally led him to the glass doors of a large office building in Kumasi. The sign carried the name of a company everyone in the city respected, Efua's company. He had no idea that the woman who owned it was tied to his life in ways he could never imagine. He only knew he needed the job to survive and continue his studies. With his usual quiet determination, he applied, and soon he was hired as an assistant in the logistics department. It was nothing grand, but to Kojo it was an opportunity. Efua walked through the office halls with confidence, her presence commanding attention wherever she went. She had built her empire with hard work, and her employees respected her discipline and vision. One afternoon, she noticed a new young worker helping arrange files and assisting others without being asked. He was focused, humble, and respectful, unlike many of the others she often saw. Something about his calm eyes and the way he carried himself caught her attention. She asked casually, "What's your name?" "Kojo, ma," he replied politely, bowing his head slightly. The name lingered in her mind. She found herself watching him from a distance over the next few days. He was not the loudest, not the strongest, but his honesty shone in small things. He stayed late to finish work, offered help to colleagues without complaint, and never asked for recognition. Efua admired that, though she tried to dismiss it as simple appreciation for a hard-working youth. Still, there was something more, something she could not explain. Every time she spoke to him, a strange warmth stirred inside her, like an echo of a bond she didn't understand. His eyes seemed familiar, his smile touched something deep within her that she thought she had buried long ago. She brushed it off, telling herself it was only imagination, nothing more. Kojo, on his part, respected her greatly. He saw in her the image of strength and success he wanted to achieve. She reminded him of what determination could accomplish, and he often felt encouraged by her words. Yet even he sensed a strange closeness in their conversations, though he didn't know why. Neither of them realized that destiny had finally placed them face to face. The mother who carried years of regret and the son who carried questions of his past were working under the same roof, unaware that the answers they both sought were standing right before them. It was a quiet afternoon at the office when fate decided to reveal its first sign. Efua had just finished a meeting and was walking through the lower floor, observing her workers. Kojo was seated at a desk, writing carefully in a ledger. As he leaned forward, his sleeve shifted slightly, and something small caught Efua's eye. Her steps froze. There, on his wrist, was a bracelet, worn, faded with time, but unmistakable. Her heart pounded violently. She had seen that bracelet before, many years ago, on a cold night in Accra. Her mind raced back to the moment she placed it on her baby's wrist before leaving him at the church steps. She had chosen it as a piece of herself to stay with him, never knowing if he would survive, never knowing if anyone would even notice. And now, right in front of her, the boy she had felt drawn to from the beginning was wearing that same bracelet. Her breath caught, and her hands trembled. The room around her blurred as she stared at Kojo. Questions stormed her mind. Could it truly be him? Was this the son she had abandoned and thought lost forever? Her chest tightened, and tears threatened to fall, but she forced herself to remain composed. She walked away quickly, locking herself in her office, her whole body shaking. "This is my son," she whispered in disbelief, pressing her hand to her mouth as the weight of the truth crushed her. All the years of guilt surged back like a flood. She remembered the cries, the cold night, the loneliness, the shame. And now here he was, alive, grown, and working in her company without knowing who she truly was. But fear rooted her in silence. What if he hated her? What if he rejected her, cursed her for abandoning him? The thought of losing him again was unbearable. She longed to run to him, to hold him, to cry out the truth, yet her courage failed her. She convinced herself that perhaps it was better not to say anything, that his life was already stable without her. Every time she saw him after that, her eyes filled with tears she tried to hide. She cherished every small interaction, every word, as if it were a stolen piece of motherhood returned to her. But deep inside, her silence tore her apart. Efua knew destiny had brought them together, yet her fear kept the truth locked in her heart. The day of truth arrived when Kojo's adoptive parents came to Kumasi to visit him. Pastor Kwabena and Amma were proud of how far he had come, and they decided to surprise him at the company after work. Efua, unaware of who they were, welcomed them politely when she saw them waiting in the reception area. She offered them seats and even a drink, noticing how their eyes shone with love and pride as they spoke of their son. Moments later, Kojo entered the room. His face lit up at the sight of Kwabena and Amma, and he rushed to embrace them. Efua stood frozen, her heart pounding as she watched the tender scene. The way Amma touched his shoulder, the way Kwabena called him, my son, it was clear, these were the ones who had raised him. Her throat tightened, and tears stung her eyes. The truth she had been hiding clawed at her chest, desperate to escape. She turned to leave, but their conversation stopped her. Amma, with a smile, said, Kojo has been a blessing from the day we found him on the church steps. We prayed for a child, and God gave us him. Efua gasped, her hands trembling. The words struck her like lightning. The bracelet, the night, the church, all of it connected in an instant. The weight was too heavy to carry anymore. She broke down, her sobs filling the room. Kojo, confused, looked at her with wide eyes. Through tears, she confessed, it was me. I was the one who left you that night. Kojo, I am your mother. Her voice cracked, every word cutting through years of silence and regret. The room fell into stunned silence. Amma's face turned pale, and Pastor Kwabena's brows furrowed with shock. Kojo staggered back as if the ground beneath him had shifted. His chest tightened, his hands shook, and a storm raged inside him. All his unanswered questions suddenly stood before him, yet the answers hurt more than the mystery. Anger, betrayal, confusion, everything boiled within him. You, he whispered, his voice trembling. You left me? His eyes filled with tears, torn between the woman who raised him and the woman who gave him life. Efua fell to her knees, crying uncontrollably. Forgive me, my son. I was young, poor, afraid. I never stopped thinking of you. But her words felt like knives, reopening every wound in Kojo's heart. He turned away, unable to bear the weight of the revelation. That day, truth shattered the walls of silence. For the first time, mother and son faced each other not as strangers, but bound by a painful truth that could no longer remain hidden. Kojo could not sleep for days after the truth came out. His mind was torn between two worlds, the parents who had raised him with unconditional love and the mother who had abandoned him yet carried the same blood in her veins. He remembered Amma's gentle hands, Pastor Kwabena's firm guidance, the laughter of their small home, and how they had given him everything without expecting anything in return. Then he remembered Efua's trembling voice, her tears, her desperate plea for forgiveness. His heart battled itself, torn between anger and longing. He avoided Efua at the office, refusing to meet her eyes. Each time he saw her from afar, guilt and rage twisted inside him. She was the woman he had dreamed of knowing, and yet she was also the source of the deepest pain in his life. His nights were restless, haunted by the sound of her sobbing confession. He asked himself again and again, should he hate her, or should he try to understand her? Efua, on the other hand, was breaking silently. She barely ate, barely slept. She watched Kojo slip away from her, terrified that the little chance destiny had given her was already gone. Every day she prayed for a miracle, for her son to give her one more chance. She wrote letters she never delivered, stood at her window wishing she could turn back time. Her success meant nothing now. All she wanted was her child's forgiveness. Finally, after many nights of turmoil, Kojo made his decision. He asked Efua to meet him at a quiet park. She arrived trembling, her eyes swollen from sleepless nights. For a long moment, they stood apart, silence heavy between them. Then Efua broke down, falling to her knees, her voice shaking. Kojo, I am so sorry. I was young, I was afraid, but I never stopped loving you. Please, forgive me. Kojo's chest tightened. He looked at the woman before him, not the powerful businesswoman the world admired, but a broken mother who carried regret for years. His heart softened. He remembered how often he had wished to know his real mother, and now she was right there, begging for a chance. Tears filled his eyes. Slowly, he stepped forward and lifted her up. His voice cracked as he whispered, "Life gave us another chance, Mama." And with those words, he embraced her tightly. Efua wept in his arms, holding her son for the first time not in dreams, but in reality. The sun was setting over Kumasi, painting the sky with shades of gold and crimson. Kojo sat quietly on a wooden bench outside the church where he often went to clear his mind. Efua sat beside him, her hands clasped tightly as if afraid that letting go would make him disappear again. For the first time in years, she felt whole, though guilt still lingered in her heart. Kojo's arms had welcomed her, and that single act of forgiveness had begun to heal wounds carved deep by time. He looked at her with eyes that carried both pain and love. "All my life," he said softly, "I wondered who I was, where I came from. I felt like a part of me was missing. Now I know the truth, and though it hurts, I choose not to live in anger." His words trembled, but they were filled with strength. Efua lowered her head, tears falling freely. She whispered, "You are stronger than I ever was, my son." Alma and Pastor Kwabena soon joined them, standing a few steps away. The sight of Kojo embracing the woman who once left him was difficult, but their hearts were too full of love to deny him peace. Alma walked forward, placing her hand gently on Efua's shoulder. "What matters now is the future," she said. "Kojo has enough love for us all." The three adults shared a silence that spoke louder than words. They were no longer divided by the past but united by the boy they all loved. Kojo rose to his feet, his voice steady as though speaking not only to them but to the world. "Sometimes pain and mistakes shape the road of destiny. My mother abandoned me, but life never abandoned our bond. We are proof that forgiveness can heal even the deepest wounds." His words carried through the evening air, sinking into their hearts. Efua held his hand tightly, Alma smiled through her tears, and Pastor Kwabena bowed his head in prayer. Together, they stood as a family, unusual, imperfect, yet bound by love and forgiveness. The scars of the past would never fully vanish, but they no longer defined their future. As the last light of day faded, Kojo looked up at the sky, his heart finally at peace. Life had been cruel, but it had also been merciful. In the end, destiny had brought him back to the arms of the woman who gave him life, and the parents who gave him love.